The return of Might and Magic is here, after a 12-year hiatus since the last game in the series. Taking greater inspiration from the World Scene games over Might and Magic 6 through 8, returning to the movement grids of dungeon crawlers of the mid-70s to early 90s, in an attempt to capture the old school feel. But does it succeed in this? Might and Magic 10 has been a game I wanted to play for a while, back in 2016 to be exact, but my close circle hated the game so much I never really picked up the game or thought about it until 2021, which was another mistake, as during that time period the server shut down, which made it so that the Steam copy could only be in demo mode, meaning you can only play the first act of the game. But I heard rumors that the game has been fixed, so why not actually talk about Might and Magic 10? Might and Magic 10 was released in April 16, 2014 and was made by Limbic Entertainment and published by Ubisoft. The premise of the game is that it takes place a couple years after Hero 6, where the main plot was about how demons of Shiog was returning to Ashan due to an eclipse, and the Archangel Uriel had a deception in order to reignite an ancient war with the Faceless. But we play as the Raiders, a band of 4 adventurers landing in the port town of Sorpagol, making this the first Might and Magic game to be actually set in a new setting. One of the first things with this game is that there are 2 difficulties, the Adventurer and War difficulty, which is basically normal and hard mode. Since this game uses a party system, you get to create 4 different characters. You get a section for 4 different races that has 3 classes in them, with all the races getting some special benefit. Like human, dwarf and elf get elemental resistance to 1 element. Some other benefits are human get to pick 4 skills at the start of the game, over 2 for the other races. Dwarves gets an additional health for each point in vitality. Elf gets an additional bonus to their evade stat, while orcs get more unique benefits like increased critical damage and a 20% chance to be unaffected by debuffs. After you have selected a race, you get to pick 3 classes, which is divided up to Might, Hybrid, and Magic classes. The human gets the classes of Mercenary, Paladin, and Free Mage. Another thing to cover with classes is that each class has an advanced class, which gives you a bonus for promoting up to it. The advanced classes are Windsword, Racist, and Archmage. Windsword gets the ability to push yourself forward 1 step by spending all your mana. They also receive a passive to automatically hit and crit an enemy at full HP. Crusaders get the ability to touch kids and call upon a holy aura to smite everyone deemed a heretic. Archmage gets the ability to stop time, but you and enemies can't do shit besides being able to cast buffs. The Elf gets the classes of Blade Dancer, Ranger, and Druid, who can be promoted to Blade Master, Warden, and Druid Elder. Blade Master gets the ability to get an extra turn if they kill with a melee attack, and they also get the ability of Carnage, which attacks all enemies in melee range. Warden gets point blank shot, which makes the Ranger attack all enemies in front of the party. Druid Elder gets 2 spells, one which heals the lowest health party member, and a calm spell. The orc classes are Barbarian, Hunter, and Shaman, which can be promoted to Warmonger, Marauder, and Bloodcaller. Warmonger gets the ability to deal more damage the less health you have, kinda like the Blood Tearstone ring in Dark Souls. Marauders get to place a trap on the ground where you stand, and Bloodcallers get mana by taking damage. The last and final race is Dwarves, who gets the classes of Defender, Scout, and Rune Priest, which can be promoted to Shield Guard, Pathfinder, and Rune Lord. Shield Guards gets a passive which makes them gain an additional chance to block for each unsuccessful block. Pathfinder gets an attack that immobilizes the first enemy. Rune Lord gets a new spell called Searing Rune, which places a rune on top of an enemy in front of you, dealing fire damage to it for 3 turns. So after picking your classes, we get to pick how our character looks like and their voice. And man, I find this part to be very lazy. You get to pick 2 portraits per sex, making it a total of 4 per race. I don't know why they didn't add more or made you be able to make the appearance of your character kinda like in Dragon Age, where you have sliders to determine the appearance. And when it comes to voices, you only have 2. You have Heroic and Cynical. After picking a class and appearance, we get to pick 2 skills unless you play as a human, and when it comes to skills in this game, you have the ability to reach Expert, Master, and Grandmaster in an assigned skill based on the class, like the previous ones. We then have the last part of making a character, the attribute system, which holds 6 attributes, and you are able to freely upgrade any of them as you get 5 points to use when making the character and then 4 points from leveling up. Attributes are simple to understand, so anyone new to this is not going to be confused, as they tend to increase one stat. The 6 attributes are Might, Magic, Perception, Destiny, Spirit, and Vitality. Might increases your melee damage by 2% for each point, same with Magic. Perception affects 2 stats. It first increases range damage, but also other attack values, which is very vague. Destiny increases your critical hit chance and your evasion stat. Vitality increases your health by 3, and it's the same with Spirit, which increases mana by 3. Now after making our party, you arrive in the port town of Sorpigal, which is the tutorial area. There's a guide who will tell the player where to go and what the different shops do. So one of the first things we need to do is talk to Maximus and kill a spider infestation in a well, because we can't leave the town until it's clear. And this is a common thing with this game, where you have to complete the main quest up to a point in order to continue playing the game. If you don't save John Morgan, for example, you're stuck in the first area, which has the lighthouse for the main quest, the den of thieves for the main quest, and Sorpigal, since the path to Sea Haven is blocked by a carriage that was attacked by bandits. And Carfol is blocked off to you until you're halfway through the first quest in Act 3. Which means there's not a lot of variety in the ways you can play the game compared to older games, where in some of them you were able to complete the game without needing any of the main quest, or be able to tackle the main quest in any order with the correct knowledge. You could even complete some of the main quests before getting the quest, like the shield that Wilbur Humphrey makes you look for, making this game a lot more linear in terms of exploring the world until Act 3. And even then, most of the exploration is mainly there to find trainers and promotion quests. While we have to deal with the spider infestation, one of the major changes due to them taking inspiration the World of Seeing games is that movement is grid-based, over 6 through 9 being freeform movement. I can only speak from personal experience, but I was hoping to see the game evolve with the increase in power of the different game engines. In 2002, when Might and Magic 9 came out, it was underdeveloped due to financial issues going on with the parent company, 3DO. The most famous thing with this game is that the end boss is a switch that you pull to get the credits, because they just said, finish a game so that we can ship this. I personally would have liked to see them try to fix the things that didn't work out in 9 in the new setting. I also have to say that I hate the movement in this game. Even if this is supposed to be old school, I can't stand this movement type. It is something you can get used to, but it's an experience I would not like to take in a while. Some other changes are, we have a hotbar out of MMOs, which is fully customizable, and you go into your spellbook or inventory to bind spells, attacks, or consumables. So this is how combat is gonna work. Turn-based with abilities not having a cooldown, and only requiring mana if it is a magical or a special ability. After completing the tutorial quest, another change has happened here, and that being the way the party levels up in this game. Over having to go train at a training center to level up, you just level up once you reach the XP cap. So having to go find a trainer is now reserved for skills only. When you level up, you get a choice to pick your attribute to increase, but now you also get to increase your skill levels. And the way the skill trees work is that it gives you a benefit like reduced chances to miss or more damage until you reach a checkpoint. When you reach a checkpoint, you are unable to level up that skill any further until you find a trainer. And the checkpoint gives you some sort of unique ability, like the dagger tree giving you an additional attack. Grandmaster Maul users be given the ability to ignore blocks. Trainers follows the pattern of having 2 expert trainers, 1 master and 1 grandmaster. So to train in the skill, you need to find a person and reach the checkpoint, and he will train you for a fee, and this is where most of the exploration happens, trying to find a trainer. Anyway, we have 2 quests to complete from here. One of them is to take back the lighthouse that has been taken over by a cult, and the second quest is to find a book in the Den of Thieves. With the lighthouse quest, one problem I had with it It was that the floors felt a little bit unbalanced. Floor 1 and 2 was perfect for a level 3 party, while floor 3 and 4 felt impossible. And here I had to say I did a second playthrough, which was a mid-max team, designed to be one of the best teams with the best classes. And with this mid-max team, floor 3 and 4 was able to do this at level 4. And this was only experienced from the encounters around the area while heading to the lighthouse, and the enemies in the lighthouse. While the first team was forced to go do something else, which kinda tells me the game isn't fully prepared for each party setup, in my mid-max team, I was able to just do it fine. Anyway, in the 4th floor, we'll get to see how boss fights are handled, or rather, only this one. A lot of the boss fight from this point on does not work like this. There's one element for each boss, which is a permanent buff that makes them immune to fear spells and poison effects, but not agony spells? I just find it a bit weird that they're immune to poison effect, but not agony spells, which basically works the same as they deal damage over time, but it's just a different magic school. Going back to the boss fight, since the fight takes place on the top of a lighthouse, the boss has the ability to knock down the party near a ledge and be insta-killed. But you can use the 4 statues in the corners to block you from being knocked down, but still have the ability to get pushed off. So avoiding the edges will make it so that you don't have to restart from a save. One thing I find annoying in combat is that you are not capable of moving while in melee combat or melee reach. This might be my lack of dungeon crawler experience, so I can't really say if this is a common thing for these games, but I think you should be able to move while being in melee range, as that can cause for some strategy. This is a bit off topic, but I have to explain some details about combat. In combat, there are 3 sizes of enemies, those being small, large, and bosses, which are generally by themselves. The reason for why this is important is because in one square, the max limit of enemies are 3 small enemies or 1 large and 1 small enemy. In this clip, I'm being ambushed by 3 groups of 2 enemies, 2 of them being in melee range, and 1 of them being 1 square away, making me unable to attack them, unless I use ranged attack or magic. But in this situation, it would have been advantageous for me to take a step to the enemy archers to take them out first, which then would allow me to focus on the other groups, which leads to another mechanic with the square limits. That being, if the enemy has a ranged attack, but is being blocked by allies, they are incapable of using their ranged attack. So in this instance, if the melee restriction did not exist, I would have only have taken damage from 2 sides over 3 sides. I also would have been able to focus on the groups in front of me after taking out the archers, so I only take 3 attacks per turn over 6. I personally don't mind if I take a attack of opportunity for moving outside of someone's melee range. They also already have a system in play for you to prevent you from moving in combat, and that one being all your party members needs to not have taken an action in order to move. Like, you can't do attack, attack, heal, and then move. All your character still needs to have an action in order for you to move. So I don't really understand why you need both systems, and especially when one of the system prevents you from being strategic. Anyway, we killed the Naga cult leader. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, it's a Naga cult. We then have a quest to find a book in the Den of Thieves, which is part of the main quest since we need to set up the next act. So we have to go through killing everything in the path, which includes the basement. And where you find the book, you'll find the boss of the dungeon, a person by the name of Luke, which, depending on if you explore the sword pickle, you get a quest to find 3 people, one of them being Luke. If you don't have a quest, you have to fight him, but if you have the quest, you get a choice to fight him or let him go. After finding the book, we then have the last quest of Act 1 that involves saving John Morgan from bandit attack in his castle. So once again, we go through the area killing every bandit we come across until we face the boss of this dungeon, who has a letter from his boss saying that we are a nuisance. So we save John Morgan, and he tells us the situation with the brigands have been attacking not just Empire emissaries, but emissaries of Ireland and the 7 cities, which means there's a mastermind behind this, so we need to find him. But we don't have enough time to think about it, as the elemental force has been taken over by a group of elves, so we need to deal with that first. Heading out on a griffin ride, we end up in the Elemental Forge to stop the elves, which serves as the main hub for a quest where we need to get multiple elemental orbs to receive a blessing. while on the topic of blessings, let's talk about them. There are 6 blessings, one for each element: light, dark, earth, fire, air, and water. The earth one you get for free by completing this quest, which allows you to break magical seals, which only appears in the forest area near Sea Haven. You also receive a set number of elemental resistance depending on what blessing, which equals 5 plus 5 times per 10 level, which means a level 40 party gets 25 of a given elemental resistance. The earth blessing is really only used once, as it is necessary to get to a main quest. So the way that this is set up is that you find a gem of a corresponding element, then you complete a puzzle, which then leads to a boss fight with a corresponding elemental. The second blessing that the majority of people will be getting is the Blessing of Shalasa, which allows you to walk on shallow water. Yeah, I think I could do that when I was 4. Which opens up the world exploration because they removed the ability to like jump and fly. Then after getting the water blessing, you can get the air or fire gem. The air blessing allows you to use teleport that is spread around the map and the typical elemental resistance. The fire blessing on the other hand is basically a permanent spell which allows you to notice enemies from a further distance than the regular, aka shit. Then we have the light and dark blessing, which also have a permanent spell effect, but they are somewhat good compared to the fire one, as they allow you to see secrets like hidden paths and hidden mechanism, which allows you to open up a secret passage that usually leads to more loot. Most of these blessings are hella bad, only really 2 of them are good, those being the air and water since they are heavily used for promotional quests. Most of the blessings have little to no impact on how you actually play the game, or they have a spell variant like the fire, dark, and light blessings. Something I haven't covered in this game so far is gear. Your characters can equip 10 types of gear. They have helmet, chestplate, armband, shoes, amulet, 2 rings, 1 ranged weapon, and 2 melee weapons. The gear follows a tier system like Diablo or most MMOs: white, green, blue, and then the special gear type, yellow, which is legendary gear basically. The things that make the gear different compared to each other is that white gear has no enchantments, while green has 1, and blue has 2. The different enchantments can be increased damage of an elemental type, increased skill level, and immunity to debuffs. And we don't talk about elemental resistance. Goddamn, that shit is worthless. Yellow gear, or relics as they're called, is more unique than the other gear types, as you have to level up the gear, and when fully leveled, they typically have 4 enchantments. These relics are pretty powerful since they are either have the best stats for their gear slot, or the enchantments are so powerful that you will take them anyways. One thing with relics is that the enchantment you get are always consistent, and they are not part of a random loot table. They will always be at this one location and that won't change, which makes it even more sad in my opinion that you can't go explore the world sooner. As we get to the Elemental Force, we'll be getting ambushed by assassins and stalkers. And no worries, I have dealt with a stalker before. Until we reach the first floor, where we meet a mysterious elf who leaves us after saying some cryptic shit. So we can restore the Earth Altar, which is the only one who doesn't have a puzzle attached to them. And you fight a giant Earth Elemental who gives us Sylvanas' Blessing when defeated. We then return to John Morgan after defeating the Earth Elemental, and we only have 1 clue in order to figure out who's the mastermind behind the brigands, and John Morgan suggests that we go find Lord Kilburn, whose autism allows him to identify any handwriting he has seen previously. And the last time that Lord Kilburn was apparently seen, he was heading towards some sort of Shantiri observation tower to the west. John Morgan also gives us a task, so if we happen to go to the pirate town, the Crag, it involves a truce, which basically just means after we had done this quest we can actually fast travel to the Crag. So we find the observation tower and talk to Lord Kilburn, and the mastermind is Lord Montbrand, a knight of the Greyhound Duchy and a hero of the Elven War and presumed dead. Kilburn also thinks his base is in the Yongshal forest, or maybe under it. So we go to the forest to find Montbrand's hideout, which apparently leads to a lost city that also leads to a dumpster pile in Sea Haven? Okay, how is this place even remotely hidden? If there's a building that leads to a cave system which ends at a door, likely someone would actually pay attention to this. Like honestly, does no one actually care about history in this world? Like would not a single person care about a lost ancient city literally in their backyard? A discovery of this magnitude would change the way that scholars all look at this. Like how in the real world, almost 70 years ago we thought we knew the oldest settlements to be either Jericho due to how old the Tower of Jericho was, or that I can't pronounce this, but we found an even older settlement which puts both of these to shame. For example, the Tower of Jericho was 7,500 BC to 6,400 BCE, and with the discovery of Göbele tepe, it is believed to be dated from 10,000 BCE to 7,500 BCE, which means it was during hunter-gatherer society and before the advent of agriculture. I will be linking videos talking about this topic because I found it very interesting. But all of this to say that some people would be heavily interested into figuring out more about this place. And another thing that comes more from a timeline perspective is that Hero 7 is the closest to the known timeline of the world's creation. But due to how the Heroes games are set up, they can't go into heavy detail about the different settings, which is why I think Might and Magic and Heroes was a perfect combo, as it allowed the world to be expanded lightly in Heroes games, and Might and Magic would allow for further exploration. But in any of these games in this setting, there's no mention of the Chanteri in any meaningful way. Like, they supposedly have humongous magical capabilities, and yet no one actually wants to make research about how they managed to create these different magical enchantments that not even modern day magisters can. I also just want to have a little bit more information about the Chanteri in any meaningful way. Like, we could have gotten more information about the Chanteri in this game, since they are directly referencing the Elder Wars, which is when the Chanteri collapsed. In Hero 6, we might have been able to get to know more about the Chanteri, since we had angels that lived when the Empire was created. And in this, we could have explained more about their cultures or, you know, anything. Anyway, where the fuck were I? Right, I was talking about fighting Montbrand. So after going through the entire Lost City of like 3 levels, we get to fight Montbrand, who turns out to be insane, thinking we are faceless puppets. So a little background on this guy. He only made one appearance before this, in Hero 6. He made his first appearance in the last scenario for the Inferno campaign, being the enemy hero that is controlled by the Faceless, and thinking he was defending the area from the Faceless. But I wonder, since the way the area worked is that anyone that leaves the area, including angels, do not remember when they were in the area. So, should he not become normal after leaving? Or has this affected his brain permanently? Montbrand is a typical boss fight in this game. Wail on him until he dies. That's it, he doesn't have any uniqueness. We then return to Jan Morgan, and he tells us about an informant in Carfall, and he has not received a message from him in a while. So John is getting worried that something might have happened to him. After all, Carfall has been in a revolt and has been trying to leave the Empire. Due to this very thing, we can't enter Carfall through any of the main gates. So we need to go through the sewer, because every game needs a sewer level. When we enter the sewers, we find the daughter of the informant, who tells us that he has been imprisoned. So going through the sewers, we eventually end up in Felaghar's mansion, where we have to fight through again. And when we reach the outside of the mansion, we meet Dunstan again, the tour guide from the beginning of the game. And from this point, you can enter the city whenever, as they open up the trade routes now. So now you can quickly travel between Sea Haven, Sorpagal and Carfall with the carriage system, and go to Sorpagal, the Crag and Carfall by ship. Which leads to a topic I want to talk about, since you have access to the easiest one here, that being class promotion. Ever since Might and Magic 7, you were locked from reaching the highest tier of a skill until you got an advanced class. The same is true here. The way the promotion works is that you have to complete a quest. Some quests don't really need any requirements, while others may need more. Like a druid, for example, only needs to have access to Carfall to get a book from a demon, while the dwarf, rune priest and defender promotions need you to have the blessing of Shalasa and Yeloth, or the air and water blessing. After getting into Carfall, we have to find the rebel leader in order to free Felaghar. And when it comes to finding the rebel leader, you kinda just have to randomly walk around town until you find a strange lady who gives us a clue on how to find Hasma. So we find Hamza and we ask him for help so that we can rescue Felaghar, and he tells us 2 things. We need to create a distraction, and we need to get the key to another sewer system that is in the jail. So we got 2 quests, one where we get the key, and the other one where we convince the Black Fang gang to create a distraction. So to get help from the Black Fangs, we need to find a chest that was on a ship. So we go there, and the ship is overrun by Nagas. So this is where you go back to the Naga cult's hideout in order to find the chest. And I have to say that this particular quest is kinda annoying, mainly having to do to the fact you can do this main quest out of order. Which sounds weird because I talk about how I liked games that allowed you to complete main quests out of order. But let me explain in this particular reason for why it is annoying. The reason it's annoying is because I had the chest from the very beginning. I found the Naga cult's hideout, and the game didn't acknowledge that I had the treasure chest that the Black Fangs were looking for. But the game forced me to go to the ship, and then I was forced to go to the hideout. And the reason for why I had the chest was because the Naga you save in the lighthouse gives you a quest to look for a sword that the cult took from him. So I tried this, and didn't get it, because there was shallow water in the hideout. But the chest wasn't behind anything like that. It wasn't behind shallow water at all. I don't know why this quest is set up like this. Like, why not make the chest I needed to find be behind shallow water? Then the player is forced to look for the water gem in order to complete this quest. And it's not like they designed the quest with the player lacking the water blessing, as the ship you head to requires it. So you need a water blessing to get to the first part of the quest after getting the quest in order to reach the ship, but you don't need it for the second part, which is finding the chest. And the game also forced me to go through all of the steps because they didn't think that someone would actually find the chest beforehand. It's fucking awful. The quest for the key is a lot simpler. You go to the Carful slum, you find an inn, you find a guard who wants to have a drinking competition. You win the drinking competition and pickpocket the key off him. Well, we have all the necessary things to break into jail. So we talk to the guards in front of the jail, and then the distraction happens, and we can enter the jail because of it. It's going through a dungeon until we find Felagar and free him, like most things in this game. But freeing Felagar, we get to know that Marcus Wolf, the current Duke of Carful, wasn't the mastermind behind it. Instead, it's someone by the name of Dunstan. So we need to find more information about Dunstan, and an innkeeper will tell us that he used to be part of an adventurer team like us, but most of them were killed except for one of them, Shiva. So we need to find this Shiva to get information about Dunstan. So we go to find this Shiva, who is also the Air Grandmaster, by the way. She tells us a little about Dunstan and the previous adventure team they were in. She tells us they were in a mythical place called the Tomb of 1,000 Horrors, and it turns out it was some sort of prison, and the guards, quote unquote, were determined to keep anything living in the prison. So Shiva and the rest of the adventurers went down, and only 2 of them made it out. Shiva also says that Dunstan might have been scarred by this event and became a different person. He became cynical, cold, and angry. She believes he felt betrayed, so we need to head out to the tomb to uncover his past, because the narrator says it. Again, how come not a lot of people study the tomb for anything? Like, sure, in this context, a lot of people don't trust the Faceless due to the events of Hero 6, but you have a direct connection with the gods in this world, so why not study that connection? So now that we enter the tomb, there are several floors that we need to get through in order to uncover Dunstan's past. So when we reach the bottom floor, we find a dream shard which allows us to head to a dream or the memory of someone. We also meet a dark elf by the name of Iruna, who says we are on the same side and share a common enemy, that being the Master of Assassins, Erebos. I don't even think he has been mentioned until we meet her. So I think this reveal is terrible, but it also has to do with the fact that there's a side quest where we enter the Dream Shard and it reveals who Erebos is and how Dunstan survived. Like, why could that not have been the reveal for the main bad guy of the story and the master manipulator? We go speak with Irina, and as it turns out, we have made Erebos accelerate his plan. How, you may ask? I don't think this is answered at all. You also may wonder, how did the elves actually enter this place and get ahead of us? Because we literally entered through the entrance. Well, they actually decided to answer this question. They created a path from the mountains to get in here because they smelled protagonist. We're then given a warning. Don't look into his mask, as he can channel the power of darkness through it. So this is where I take a deviation from the main quest in order to talk about the memory side quest. As we enter the memory, we start at an inn with the adventurer party Dunstan was with. We speak to a soothsayer telling us about Dunstan's character, which then leads to us jumping into a void after opening a door. Out of everything to take from Dark Souls, you had to take it from the worst one, but the void shows us their travels until they reach the tomb. We enter the tomb now, and we get to see what happens with the adventurers and how they die one by one. But honestly, this area is pretty cool to me. You have these dislocated platforms with these tentacle monsters floating about. It's like, it kind of reminds me of Apocrypha from Skyrim, which honestly is a very cool aesthetic. I know that these are recolored enemies, but some things can work with context, like these are nightmaric and haunting creature to remember, so recoloring the creatures to be hard to make out makes sense to me, as we're literally entering the memory of a trauma victim. We eventually reach a point where the dwarf of the party will make his heroic sacrifice, and this is on a single file line where you're being chased by terrors. After some additional stuff we actually did, you get to fight a shadow dragon, which could have been a cool thing if we didn't kill 2 of them before we enter in the memory. But defeating the Shadow Dragon transports us to a face-to-face conversation with Erebos. I would definitely say that this is the best quest in the game in concept. In concept, delving into a trauma-filled memory is interesting, but this quest is slowed down by the teleporters as they seem to go randomly into different places that you've already been to, like the entry of the dungeon. This also has a good reveal for the main bad guy, which makes me wonder, why is this not a main quest? After leaving the tomb, we head back to John Morgan, and his daughter has been kidnapped. We then tell everything we found in the tomb, and since John Morgan doesn't want to have a full-blown war to happen, he tells us to talk to Crag Hat. Now, we have the big final for this game. We have to stop Marcus Wolf and Erebos. We have to fight through Dark Elves and Marcus's men until we reach the mysterious elf from the forge. His name is Salvin. Say hi to Salvin, because this is the last we see of him. He will ask us an actual question. That's a rare thing in this game. He wants to know, what are we fighting for? And we get 5 choices. First one being for fame, second one being for revenge, third one being for justice, fourth one being for fun, and lastly is for a little girl. 4 of these choices lead to the same end result. Sure, you get some additional dialogue with him, but you end up fighting him with the first 4 options. And the 5th option makes him kill himself, because he apparently realizes something when it comes to his own daughter, so he stabs himself in the heart because of it. We then enter Carful's palace, and we have to fight through a gauntlet of black guards. About halfway through the palace, we find Marcus holding Anne hostage, telling us to give up, but then Anne does something. She bites his hand and kicks him in the knee, like grandfather, like granddaughter, and Marcus runs away again. We then have to fight through until we meet him again, and honestly, he is a joke. And I don't mean in the sense that he was an easy boss. No, literally, he gets beaten by anything, making his character just a joke. Oh, you thought you're gonna get to fight this motherfucker? Fuck you. Like, I literally beat him by casting a debuff spell that lowers armor. He didn't take a single point of damage, and he is defeated, making his entire character out to be an entire fucking joke. After we beat him, we get a cutscene where Craghack and Erebos fights, and it is here to establish how Craghack died in Shades of Darkness. It also shows that Erebos' mask was destroyed. So that conversation about being wary of his mask is something we don't need to worry about, which then leads to the final main quest, and that being to hunt down and defeat Erebos. We find Erebos after going through 3 levels, and he actually explains what his plan is. Drum roll, please. He's bored. Yes, that is his plan. So he tells us how there used to be people who could challenge his mind, Archangel Michael being one of them. And after killing Michael, he felt a great accomplishment, but then a great emptiness. So he got the idea that if there's no one able to give him the challenge that he wanted, he'll make one. So he made it so the party became his arch nemesis. And now a boss fight ensues. The boss fight is more of a puzzle than a typical boss fight in this game, which makes it the most unique boss in the game. Instead of just wailing on top of the boss, he will heal and teleport away when he's dealt half of his health bar. But in the center of the arena, there's a way to deal with the boss. It is a strange altar with missing pieces, and there are 4 places in this boss arena you need to go to get the pieces from. Once everything is collected and you return to the altar, it destroys Erebus with a light laser beam. If there's one problem I have with this particular combat encounter, is that you always walk in combat, which means that you only walk 1 step at a time, which again just leads to my issue with movement in this game. But that marks the end of the game. I have tried to cover some of the issues when I felt it was natural to bring them up, but this segment is where I talk about some issues. Let's talk about the fact that the game is an asset dump. I understand fully that they reuse models from Hero 6, since it takes place some years after that game. But here's a villager model from Dark Messiah. Here's the guard model from Dark Messiah. The entirety of the Blackguard. Here's Sana's character model recolored red. In the memory of Dunstan, we have a Heroes 5 dwarf model. But they don't only reuse models, they reuse sound effects as well. The level up sound effect is the same as when you enter turn-based mode in Might and Magic 6 through 8.
Oh well, fewer companions, bigger shares.
And the quest received is also the same from Might and Magic 6 through 8.
Prince and heir to the throne of Enroth.
This really makes it look like no one cared, or they were just plain lazy when making the game. The game also suffers from textures not functioning, like when I got to the tomb of the breast cancer awareness. This is also very noticeable on the Assassin and Shade. They have this cloak of glitched textures, which I thought it was intended until I saw how running water looked like. Some other issues I have with the game is the amount of ambushes that happen. It is used throughout the entire game, like they only thought to make the game hard was to spam and ambush, instead of giving a wide variety of enemies with different counterplays, or making bosses have more complicated mechanics. I also wish that positioning mattered a lot more. The Naga boss in the lighthouse, you had to be wary of your position, so you didn't get one shot, but in the majority of cases, you can just stay in front of the boss, wailing until the boss dies. In most cases with positioning, you can block from where you get attacked from. Instead of being attacked from 4 directions, you can move to change it to be attacked by 2 directions, by standing in a corner for example. And I wish that played a lot more in this game. Another thing I have an issue with is the map is tiny as hell. The reason why a small world matters here is because you play so linear, as some things are locked away until you complete the main quest, while in the other games you had a linear story in a non-linear world. You were able to go and do whatever. Another thing which is very mild compared to some of the other issues I have talked about. I am very annoyed at the amount of repeating dialogue from the party. Who forgot to take a bath? And stay down. Yeah, it's an incredibly minor thing, but it gets annoying after a while. Another thing I want to point out is when it comes to the character creator. In older games you had more options to create a unique character in terms of voices and portrait. The game also has issues with performance. It will lag during transition to a different named area. Luckily I haven't had the game crash on me, unlike some other games. I also find the music to be very forgettable, as they don't seem to try in that field either. I can see why people would like this game, but the things I like with these games are not in this. Being able to explore a world without the feeling of being hindered is what made me like these games to begin with. But I just keep seeing a failed opportunity here to expand on the setting, and it was a step backwards in terms of gameplay for me. Would I honestly play this game again? No, I think playing it twice was enough for me.